me feeling like I'm academics.
All right, so chat. Tory Lanez suffered a really dramatic setback. So his appeal, he had two appeals, right? Give me 1 second. Oh, wow. Wait, give me one. I want to make sure I read the full thing because I believe. So Tory had two appeals in. Okay, let me start from the beginning. Tory Lanez was convicted of shooting Meg Thee Stallion, right? Do I believe he did it? No. I think Meg's a liar. I think Meg's a drunk. And honestly, I do believe, in my personal opinion, that Tory Lanez was wrestling over the gun with Kelsey. That's my opinion, right? Regardless of my opinion, he was convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, right? Which is the shooting of Meg Thee Stallion. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was sentenced in December 2022. We're approaching December 2025. That's about to be 3 years. Now, even though he's sentenced to 10 years, he's going to have to serve about 6 or 7. Most places, and depend on what jurisdiction you're in the feds, you got to do 85%. But California, usually a place with overcrowding, sometimes it could go down to even 65%. Or some people even say 50-50. When I mean 50-50 means like as long as you do 50% of your time, you could be eligible for release. Currently, his parole date is 2029, which would be 4 years from now. And essentially, you know, not only does he not want to be incarcerated for another, what would be 4 years from now, his immigration status is up for, it's on the rocks. Barring any last minute, hurdle or last minute, Hail Mary that he had that establishes his citizenship, Tory is a citizen, from what we know and what everybody knows, of Canada, not the United States. As usual law, federal law definitely, but most states usually accept that if you are a immigrant, whether legally or illegally, if you then commit a crime that is punishable by over a year and a day, which is usually called a felony, if you serve that time, usually they refer you to the federal authorities for removal, or some people might know that process as deportation. Now, California is a little bit weird situation because California is, California, specifically Los Angeles is known as a sanctuary city, which they usually don't refer their inmates to ICE for the deportation process. However, Tory is a famous celebrity. ICE knows approximately when he's going to get out. They're not going to let a guy who just did a felonious sentence go back into society without picking him up, right? So essentially, Tory's pretty much going to get deported. What does that mean? He's a musician. He's lived in Florida for years. He also lived in LA for a while. He would have to be restricted to going back to Canada and be ineligible of ever coming back into the United States for tour or anything else based on the fact that he would be deported. So it's a big deal if he's deported. Now, obviously for him, the main thing right now would be, how do I not spend the next 4 years in jail? And I'm saying next 4 years because he's already done 3. We're assuming he would probably get out in 7 years when his parole date is, which would be in 2029. He had 2 appeals open. One appeal is what's called a he submitted a writ of habeas corpus. And I've explained this before. They make the legal shit sound very difficult, but it's not. Habeas corpus is a Latin phrase of, it's a plea of innocence, or it's a show me the proof why you're taking someone's right. Now, you could have a writ of habeas corpus for anything if you feel you feel that a right that's guaranteed by the Constitution is actually being deprived of you unlawfully or without proof or anything else. So this is a Hail Mary appeal, that particular one, but it's basically says you have to show me why I'm locked up. Now, the first thing they're going to say is you're locked up because you went through a legal, fair, and just trial that a jury of your peers convicted you in, right? Now, of course, Tory's going to have his retort to that, but a writ of habeas corpus is what I call a Hail Mary. If anybody's familiar with football, Hail Mary is usually like, it's like 4th and 45, okay? It's just that type of situation. Meaning that it's a long shot. It's a long shot because generally speaking, most of the reason why you would be locked up would have some legal process. Like, for example, if they just took you into custody and they held you for, I don't know, they had you for 3 months at a county jail, you have no charges. Now, usually, a writ of habeas corpus would bring to the attention to the court to say, hey, my client is locked up without any charges and he's been held and detained unlawfully. He needs his freedom immediately. And that's a typical way how a writ of habeas corpus would be used and it would be granted, right? Okay. So, again, and I'm explaining this kind of laboriously, but I want you guys to understand it because it's 2 appeals, and I'm gonna get to the more relevant appeal that was denied. But this appeal, it's a long shot. It says y'all are holding me against my will, or you're depriving me of my freedom for no reason, right? Or not a lawful reason. It's a long shot because the mere fact that you got indicted, you went to court, you picked a jury, they had a whole court case. That is the reason why you're locked up. So a writ of habeas corpus is usually if, say they just pick you up, say they're having some investigation, they pick you up and they have you locked up for 20 days. That's a good way to get out of that, right? Okay. Now, the other appeal that he had was appeal for a new trial. And Tory was saying that the trial was fucked up. It was scuffed. Things were introduced that shouldn't be introduced. His lawyer was a conflict of interest. He brought up many different things that he wanted a new trial to try to prove his innocence. Now, the road to freedom, if you are granted a new trial, is that you could be granted a bail pending a new trial, and for some situations, like this case probably costs $500,000 or more to try for Tory. Maybe the prosecutors are like, we don't want to spend that again. We're not even going to do it. So you're free, right? So that's another way. The appeal that got denied, and it was really affirmed, is that the California Court of Appeals has affirmed that Tory Lanez's prison sentence and his appeal for a new trial, they don't see the reason for a new trial. Now, I'm going to try to get into a little bit more details because there's actually paperwork on this. Here we go. And by the way, this is the court's opinion. And yes, Tory could still appeal this appeal and really appeal the same thing, but just to a higher court. It will go to the California Supreme Court. So the way how appeals work, you have the local or county courts, which is Los Angeles County Court. They sent him to jail. He kind of appealed it to kind of what's like almost like a circuit court, but it's a little bit different. I think it's a superior court or something like that. I forgot what it's called. And then after that court, you'd have to go to the California Supreme Court. And after that court, if that court also still affirms it or denies him a successful appeal, his last option would be to the Supreme Court of the United States, right? So the federal court actually listens to every issue in America. To be honest, the Supreme Court is not going to listen to this Tory case. There's nothing of, constitution relevance that they would feel that they would need to rule to clarify an existing rule or a prior rule or taking into account maybe other rulings in the past. So they're not going to listen to this case. California's Supreme Court, which is just the Supreme Court for the state, would they listen to it? Probably. But still, I can't see anything. And I want to be realistic with you guys. And I'm a Tory supporter. So what am I saying? Tory's not getting out on appeal, people. And I love Tory. And I don't think he did in the context or how it's accused, the things they accuse him of. But I want to be realistic with y'all. I don't think he's getting out on appeal. Tory's last chance, if you ask me. And just that you guys know, President Donald Trump could not pardon him. Why? It's a state charge. Donald Trump could pardon anyone with a federal charge. Tory does not have a federal charge. Okay? Now, could he use his influence and pressure people to probably do something? Maybe he could. But this is where it circles back to, because California is a liberal state, which falls in line with it's always Democrat. It's a red state. And the governor is a governor that is not too fond, not only of Donald Trump, which means he would lack influence, but it's a governor that is pretty woke. And I personally can't see them pardoning, because he could be pardoned, but it would have to be by the California governor. I can't see them, I think it's Newsom. I can't see them pardoning someone who was even accused of shooting a woman, right? Like most of the really woke people, they're like super protect women, women are right, women. The guy whose party got him elected in a state that is all about protect women, this and third, why would he pardon Tory Lanez, who's accused, even if you don't believe it or not, of shooting a woman? So I don't think he's gonna. That's his last chance, if you ask me. And I'm being honest with you, I don't see it working, but I could be wrong. We'll see. Anyway, it says, after hearing further argument from both the defense and the prosecution, the court concluded the prosecution had proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the victim was vulnerable within the meaning of the rule. The court viewed Peterson post-incident conduct as a major aggravating factor in this case. So they're affirming the sentence by saying, no, you deserve 10 years because of how you acted after the incident. This is with respect to the mitigating factors. The court found Peterson's participation in a charitable causes to not be very significant. They said that Peterson had been an asset to the community and helped people out. And it wasn't a recognized factor in mitigation, but it was important nonetheless. Similarly, the court said that Peterson's low risk of violent recidivism was not a major factor, but it was a factor. The only one of these findings Tory Lanez actually challenged on appeal is the vulnerable victim finding, referencing to Harris, which is Kelsey Harris, statement to the prosecutors that she saw Peterson reach towards the center console after threatening to shoot her. Peterson contends that Pete, that's Megan Thee Stallion, should have recognized there were indeed signs that an armed individual may be in the vehicle, and thus had the ability to run or duck once she saw the gun being pointed at her. Whatever. All right. Let's see if we can find some more details. All right. Oh, here we go. So this is the appellate opinion. And I don't know if you've ever seen like an appellate. So in the appellate court, there's no guilty, no innocent. You get an opinion on a ruling. That's what the appellate court system is for. They don't make decisions. They review decisions, right? And there's a whole context here and index. And then let me just go to the opinion part. And this is what the judges in this appellate court is saying. Okay. So Tory had claimed prosecutorial misconduct, this and third, whatever. Okay. Let's see if I got to go down. This is a long document. Fuck. He claimed that they improperly and there was improper admission of rap lyrics and videos. I can't remember none of that happened, but he claims it did happen. Let me go just to the opinion, because that's what matters. Give me a second. Okay, conclusion, right? No, that's conclusion. Oh, look like the opinion's kind of stated throughout. All right. I'm not going to just go through all this, but essentially they disagree with Tory that the case or the trial was not fair in a way where he would need a new trial, and that the arguments made or the things thought about in sentencing that gave him 10 years were unreasonable. They're basically saying, nah, it was all reasonable, right? Now, okay, here's Lane's actual appellate argument. Okay, so this is one of his briefs. Yeah. So when you get to appellate court, you submit a brief. Your opponent, or in this case the prosecutor, they submit a brief. The judge reads both briefs. Usually they'll schedule maybe like a what's called an oral argument that y'all could argue these points, that the judge could ask questions. And then there's an opinion put out with a decision, right? Okay. All right, here we go. I don't think they're saying there's newly added evidence, improper admission of his tattoos. So they're believing that his tattoos should have never been brought up. Okay. There's a picture that had him with shirtless, which was in his mugshot, I believe. And there's I don't know if you've seen Tory Lanez shirtless. Pause. He has a AK-47 tatted on his chest, and according to Tory's team, this is prejudicial because if he's accused of shooting a woman, and when the jury sees a picture with him with a gun on his chest tatted, they might assume that he is capable of doing that if he has a gun tatted on him, right? Okay. All right. So, again, only way Tory gets out, and I'm being honest with y'all, he would have to get a pardon from, I believe, Gavin Newsom. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to have to serve this time. I think the next step for Tory is to figure out a way that after he serves his time, he's not deported. And I think that would also mean, if I'm Tory, I would go marry your baby mom or some shit like that. I think you could still avoid being deported. Marry your baby mom, marry somebody. You could marry people in jail, or, have somebody fudge something. Like, he has to maintain his citizenship, if you ask me. All right? Okay. Now, should we do the Drake topic?